6:15 is the time right now, and for 9 years, Main Street Project has been handing out gift bags to people experiencing homelessness in our city. To make it happen, though, the nonprofit holds a donation drive every year. They hope to assemble 500 gift bags, and we thought we'd check in and see how they're doing. So this morning, up early on Zoom, is Interim Director of Development, Cindy Titus. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. So how are you guys doing with your goal to get to 500?
Yeah, we're doing good. As you said, this is our ninth year doing this donation drive. It's one of our biggest donation drives that we do throughout the year. I think we started back in 2017 and probably did about, one or 200 gift bags, and now we're up to 500 gift bags. And we have a lot of donations coming in, but we're just putting a last call out there. We know that Manitoba is generally very supportive of the work that Main Street Project does, and we just want to put that last call out there for folks who may want to participate by donating to our holiday gift drive.
What kinds of things are you looking for in terms of donations? Is it monetary or is it actual items?
Both are great, actually. In terms of the actual items, it would be things like hygiene items in a smaller, individual package sizes, granola bars, softer granola bars, socks, new underwear, and then, some fun items like candies or playing cards. And in terms of financial donations, that's also really helpful. And for the rest of December, our board of directors has very generously pledged to match all donations up to $20,000 for the rest of the month. So it's a great time to make a donation to Main Street Project, and we'd encourage folks to do that if you have the means.
Where and how do you hand out the gift packages gift bags that you put together?
The gift bags are handed out across all of our programs at Main Street Project. So that includes our emergency shelter, our housing programming, withdrawal management services, and then through our mobile outreach program as well. So we're aiming to hand out at least 500 gift bags to folks all across our programs.
What kind of a difference do they make in people's lives?
Well, the intention is to make sure that everybody that we're supporting on December 25th has a gift to open, and I think that's appreciated by folks. But it's also a really good way to get much needed items to people. So, a lot of folks experiencing homelessness don't have regular access to hygiene items or socks or underwear, and that's a lot of what we provide at Main Street Project. So this is a great way to let folks know that people are thinking about them and that they care about them and we care about them, and then to get them those much needed items that they need.
What does it look like? You mentioned 200 to 500, and then I didn't retain whether that was year over year that you're making that many more bags, or whether that was since the program started.
Well, since the program started, we've increased from about 1 or 200 bags during the holidays to about 500 or a little more than 500. So I think that speaks to the need that we're seeing in Manitoba that's grown over the years, and the demand on our programs and services as well. So all of that has grown significantly over the years, and we're doing our best to meet that need as the years go on.
And what's the change been year over year, Cindy, that you've noticed, either in terms of what items people need out there, or else in terms of the numbers of people you're serving?
Yeah, we're definitely serving more people. When we started this gift drive at Main Street Project, our shelter was served 75 people a night on mats on the floor, and since then our shelter has grown largely during COVID to 120 beds, and then in terms of our housing programming, that's grown as well over the years, and our mobile outreach team is definitely serving a lot more folks. We all know that visible homelessness has grown in the city, and so our outreach team is, meeting with a lot of those folks and getting them the items that they need. So the need continues to grow, unfortunately, but we are doing our best to be there and meet those needs for everybody as much as we can.
What's the deadline, and how do people get donations to you?
Yeah, so the deadline is to receive donations for the holiday gift drive is next Monday, December 15th. So we'd like to have all donations in office by that day. You can visit mainstreetproject.ca to learn more about how to give to that. And then, of course, we're accepting financial donations ongoing. Indefinitely, but if you want your 2025 tax receipt by the end of December. So deadline is December 31st for that.
Thank you for being up early and for what you do at Main Street. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Marcy.
That is Cindy Titus up live with us on Zoom, Interim Director of Development for Main Street Project. So they're calling out for the last push for donations, their 9th annual holiday gift drive. They put together 500 bags. I love that they say they want everyone on the 25th that they work with to have something to open. All the details and drop-off hours, just to reiterate that, can be found on their website, so mainstreetproject.ca. Well, next on the show today is the second day of a 2-day meeting in Montreal between G7 ministers with portfolios in industry and tech. One of the main issues is artificial intelligence. So let's talk about how we're going to get together globally. Mark Daly is with us, professor and chief AI officer at Western University, and he's here via Zoom. Good morning.
Morning.
So what kind of coordination around AI are these G7 ministers going to be specifically discussing in Montreal?
So AI now underpins economic competitiveness, national security, public services. And so this conversation is really going to be about who sets the terms for all of that. What are the standards? What are the norms? How do we get access to compute and data? And it's really important for Canada to be part of that conversation.
How is Canada planning to increase our AI sovereignty?
So we tend to think of sovereignty in terms of binaries. Either something is sovereign or it's not sovereign, and the reality is more subtle. It's a spectrum. So when Canada thinks about sovereignty, what we're actually thinking about is not should we do everything alone? Because we can't, and that doesn't make sense. It means, do we have the talent? Do we have the IP? Do we have the infrastructure here at home to be able to be a good partner so that we can build the alliances that make us a global player and not just a customer?
The answer to that question right now is no, right? So is Canada positioned to grow that in any concrete way? Like, what do you see that might give Canadians confidence that we have a plan to at least improve our role in this?
I actually disagree. I think the answer is
good.
yeah. Canada has an incredible amount of talent. 2 of the 3 winners of the Turing Award for inventing deep learning are based right here in Canada. So we have people, we have commercial ecosystem that is built around that. We have startups like Cohere, and we also have a lot of green energy, which the world needs to be able to do compute. So we have all of that. And we have a long history of being a good multilateral collaborator. So we have thought leadership, we have history of being able to influence standards and norms. And so I think that positions Canada really, really well to be an agent of compromise around the G7 table between, say, the competing positions of the United States and the EU.
That's interesting. The positioning is interesting when you're framing it that way. I want to talk about the states. So, does a G7 meeting about AI coordination mean much if players like Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg aren't involved?
So G7 is just one of the rooms in which this conversation is taking place. And that's the way it has to be. There are many other meetings through the UN, through the OECD, where you see traditional state diplomats around the table. You also see civil society organizations, and you see paradiplomatic representatives from the big tech companies. So this is a multidimensional discussion happening in many places. And in a lot of those places, we have states talking directly to powerful tech companies. And I think that's exactly right. All of the stakeholders are engaged in the conversation.
What about leadership in the States, though? In February, listeners might recall U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at that time warning EU leaders to go easy on regulation against AI companies. How can Canada and other Western countries then work together regulating this industry when the biggest stakeholder is, outwardly hostile to regulation, really?
So that was an important piece of rhetoric signaling the US's position. But the reality is every G7 nation in that room wants their industry to be able to sell to customers in every other nation. So there is that shared incentive to find standards, maybe not regulations, but means of cooperation that make it easy for each country's industry to sell to customers in every other country.
The consumption of energy by AI infrastructure is not on the agenda for this meeting. How much of a miss is that, given that it's such a hot issue right now, talking about how we're going to move forward energy-wise, especially in Canada?
I think it's implicitly part of the conversation because you can't have advanced AI without the energy to power it. And Canada is a country with a lot of green energy and the capacity to develop even more green energy. And so energy is actually a geostrategic tool and an advantage for Canada in these conversations.
Thank you for your time this morning in analyzing this. We'll see what they come out with.
Thanks for the chat.
That is Mark Daly, Professor and Chief AI Officer at Western University. Well, you might be up early this morning, and maybe part of what you do in December is open an advent calendar. Corey and I have been talking about this in the office. Your mom does something cute, right?
Yeah, she every year she has this kind of like string of these tiny little knitted socks, like 25 of them. And then she fills them with little mini cookies, and then every day there's 4 of them, so there's one for each of us, and then we open them up after supper. If we all eat our suppers, of course.
Yes, that's important.
Then we all get like a little mini cookie with advent treat. So.
Cute. Did you ever do the chocolates?
Yeah, I did the chocolate, and we also had these 4 candles in our house too. That every Sunday of Advent we would also light the candle. So
that's nodding to the religious roots of Advent.
Yeah.
Advent's come a long way. We have an item coming up about this in the show, and changed a lot. Because if you have an Advent calendar now, then you probably are cracking chocolate. That's the most common one, I think. But you might also be opening mini perfume or maybe some other consumer product. Maybe you even have an advent calendar for the dog. Advent calendars were not always like that at all. They went from being a religious ritual to being something very commercial in 2025. This morning, CBC producer Leah Hendry explains the journey.
Oh, that's really cute.
For Maya Warwick Brunel, the Christmas countdown has begun.
And every little door inside has a small jar of jam. So there's these tiny little jars that each probably would cover maybe a small piece of toast.
This advent calendar is a gift from her mum, who moved away from Montreal a few years ago. Maya won't be able to spend Christmas with her, so it's a way for them to stay connected over their shared love of jam.
There's cherry with pink peppercorn. Oh, orange, yuzu, and grapefruit. That one was really tasty.
Maya has been getting advent calendars since she was a kid, but she's never really thought about the meaning behind those 24 tiny doors.
Way back in the Roman Empire times, it developed as a way of preparing for the coming of Christ.
Matthew Anderson teaches religious studies at St. Francis Xavier University. In the church, Advent is the 4-week period leading up to Christmas. And Matthew says it's not all warm and fuzzy.
And the first 2 Sundays are anticipation of the coming of Christ at the end of time, the sort of judgment day. It's a really apocalyptic kind of a time. It's not at all kind of Christmassy.
The last 2 Sundays swing back to more familiar territory, messages of hope and acceptance.
It's a festival that, if people actually paid attention to it, is particularly suited for our weird and wonderful time right now in the world. And it also brings up, of course, a moral choice. How will I behave in this world? For most of us, it's who gets the biggest chocolate.
The first Advent calendars didn't have any sweet treats, just doors that opened to pictures of angels and baby Jesus. It was a way to get kids excited about the holiday. In 1971, Cadbury began pumping out its own chocolate Advent calendar. The rest is history.
And what we've seen now is it's become grossly commercialized.
Robert Warren is a marketing expert at the University of North Dakota. He says up until about 10 years ago, chocolate was the go-to Advent calendar. Now it's morphed into just about everything.
Nespresso released their advent calendar, so let's open it.
Oh, it's vanilla. I love vanilla. Day 4 is a rollerball fragrance by Skylar.
There's even an ice cream advent calendar and one for crocheters, where you get a pattern every day to make a different character from the Peanuts comic.
I'm thinking that's just so ironic, given that Charles Schulz's Christmas special is trying to teach you about the real meaning of Christmas.
Robert says advent calendars are just Christmas creep. Companies trying to capitalize as early as possible on holiday gift buying. That's why there's an advent calendar for every budget. You can spend $10 on one at the grocery store, or a lot more, Like that time Tiffany's sold an advent calendar full of jewelry for more than $100,000. This year, each Canadian household is expected to spend about $1,000 on Christmas gifts. There's no official data on how much the advent calendar industry rakes in every year, but
based upon everything I've seen, we're talking well over $1 billion.
And it's not just parents buying them for their kids. Many advent calendars cater to young adults.
The millennials really want an experience. Keep in mind, they're now the biggest purchasing generation out there. So if you think about an advent calendar, it gives them an experience every day.
Even Matthew Anderson, the religious scholar, isn't all that bothered by the commercialization of Advent.
The Christian church has never been at its best when it's kind of shrilly demanding that things be, put the Christ back in Christmas.
He says people are going to celebrate the holidays however they want. And he doesn't think there's anything wrong with having something to look forward to. Even he's getting into it.
One of my favorites is the idea of a whiskey calendar. I'm hoping this year, who knows?
For The Cost of Living, I'm Leah Hendry.
For more stories about how money shapes our lives in big ways and small, check out the Cost of Living podcast. Or you can catch them here on the radio on CBC every Tuesday starting at 11:30 with new episodes. We are now just days away from the House of Commons powering down, actually, for the holidays. Before MPs go home, the Conservatives, though, are tabling a motion that is non-binding. But Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says it will force the Liberals to, quote, put up or shut up about pipelines. Ryan Tumulty's here, political reporter with the Toronto Star, to talk about it. Hello there.
Hi there.
So tell us about this motion.
Yeah, I mean, it is an opposition day motion. So this is the Conservatives' day to set the agenda in the House of Commons, and this is what they've decided to do with it. It talks about the MOU. It says that the House takes note of the MOU. And then it says that the House supports the construction of one or more pipelines to the West Coast to bring Alberta bitumen to Asian markets. That is language sort of lifted right out of the MOU. But also very narrowly focused on one part of the MOU, this pipeline piece.
So how does it differ from the agreement, the MOU that was signed in November between Alberta and Ottawa then?
Yeah, it uses the same language about one section, but leaves all the other sections out. So, for example, there's no mention in this motion about supporting higher industrial carbon pricing, which is what's in the MOU with Alberta, and which the Conservatives oppose. There's no mention of the Pathways Carbon Capture and Storage Project. There's no mention of higher methane regulations or any of the other things that Alberta has committed to do as part of this broader energy deal, which is what the MOU is.
So what are they looking to do, the Conservatives, with this vote? Like differentiate themselves or try to call out the government to say, it looks like they're in line with what we were always talking about with pipelines, but actually not? Like, what are they looking to do here?
I think they're trying to wedge and make an uncomfortable vote for some Liberal MPs. There are Liberal MPs, especially on the West Coast in BC, who have expressed reservations about this deal, specifically about the part on a pipeline. They have all talked about this as, a deal that isn't solely about a pipeline, and that doesn't mean that a pipeline will happen. They emphasize that, this is just the first step and that sort of thing. Because I think for them, some of their constituents aren't wild about the idea of a pipeline going to the West Coast, and especially not wild about the end of the tanker ban. So, they are trying to put those Liberal MPs in a difficult position. Either vote against your own government's sort of document, is how the Conservatives are framing this, or vote for it and show that you are, in fact, as supportive of pipelines as you pretend not to be.
I want to talk before you go this morning about another piece of Liberal legislation that's faced a lot of challenges. I'm talking about Bill C-9. So what's the latest hurdle? This is the government's anti-hate legislation.
Yeah, so this piece of legislation, it talks about strengthening the sort of language around hate speech and creating protections for religious institutions, so synagogues, mosques, etc. Some of the protests we've seen around religious institutions this year, this is sort of aimed at those. There is a provision in hate speech legislation called the religious exemption. It says that someone can essentially, commit hate speech, read hate speech, and do so if they are doing so based on a good faith interpretation from a religious text. So if they are drawing that inspiration from the Bible, from the Quran, from another religious document, then that hate speech is not covered under this law. The Bloc Québécois have long opposed that provision and apparently reached a deal with the Liberals to remove it from this legislation in exchange for the Bloc's support to move this legislation through the House of Commons quickly. But it seems yesterday we found out that the Justice Minister did that, according to CBC, without really talking to the Prime Minister's office. And it seems like maybe that deal is falling apart. And as a result, this legislation is getting stalled. There is an 8-hour committee meeting today, so it's possible that this legislation will move through then, but we really don't know.
All right, well, we'll see what happens then. Thanks for this, Ryan. Appreciate your analysis today.
All right, thank you.
That is Ryan Tumulty, a political reporter with the Toronto Star, with us most Tuesdays for Ottawa Report. Well, Mayor Scott Gillingham, as I mentioned, does want an emergency response service that's dedicated to mental health calls. It's an idea he was floating last year. He's asking the city now to hire a consultant to see how a plan like this could work. So police responded to 21,000 well-being checks last year. Here's Mayor Gillingham speaking to reporters about it.
Establishing a fourth response, which is specifically for mental health calls, would help alleviate some of the calls that the police are taking and allow police to do police work, would also alleviate fire and paramedics from those calls, and ultimately get people in a mental health crisis the response that they need with trained mental health workers.
You proposed this in 2024, October, so 13 months ago, 14 months ago. Realistically, when would this be ready? Sometime in what would be your second term, should you win again?
Hopefully, we can get the report from Dr. Contronio sometime, sometime in 2026. Maybe get the report perhaps in stages, but I don't have a date yet as far as when any program could be rolled out. But it's important that we look at this. Other cities are doing this. We want to get people the help that they need in mental health calls, and we want to alleviate some of the calls that police, fire, and paramedics are taking.
Mayor Scott Gillingham speaking with reporters, including Bartley Kivas from CBC last week, about this proposal for a community crisis response service, as he calls it, a fourth emergency service dedicated to mental health calls. So he says the proposed unit would not require police or paramedics, but trauma-informed responders would be part of it. So let's take you to Ottawa. They have a system like this in place. Theirs is the Distress Centre of Ottawa and Region. It started as a pathway for people in crisis. It receives, I understand, 60,000 calls a year. Jessica Fern is here via Zoom. She's Executive Director of the Distress Centre of Ottawa and Region. Hi, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm just curious, how does your response system work in Ottawa and what led to it?
Well, Distress Centre of Ottawa and Region has been around for over 55 years. And we really emerged out of a recognition that there needs to be this other pathway between either ignoring mental health crises, which thankfully we don't see as much as we did 55 years ago, and this immediate engagement of emergency response services. Instead, we need an option that allows community to be there for each other in a supportive capacity. And that's really how our service continued to grow to be what it is today. And the way that we work is largely through partnerships. So whether it's partnerships through local hospitals, with our emergency response services, we provide a 24/7, 365 days a year access for folks to be able to reach out and connect with trauma-informed supportive resources that can be there for them in that moment, can hopefully de-escalate, divert calls from emergency response, and get people connected to the services and supports that they need.
So it is, when you say people to reach out, like if I'm in distress and I call 911, then is it connected? So mental health professionals solely might be the ones that respond?
So we operate actually a variety of different services, but it is absolutely possible through our partnerships with the 911 dispatch here in Ottawa. So first of all, folks can contact us directly. We have a phone number that folks can reach out to. There's no requirement for a referral or middleman. You can reach us directly through our phone number or through our partnership with the federal 988 National Suicide Crisis Hotline. But we also have a partnership with the first responders. So what that looks like in practice is that if dispatch is contacted by what they identify as a mental health concern or crisis, they can do what's called a warm transfer, which means they transfer that caller directly over to our trained responders who remain on the line with that person. And in about 25% of cases, our responder is able to de-escalate the situation to the point that the caller is able to say, you know what? I'm all right. I have a plan for where to go next, and they can call off that dispatch. No matter what, making that transfer to us also frees up the dispatch to be able to respond to the next call. And then hopefully, even if the paramedics or the police do arrive, we've been able to be with that person and de-escalate the situation such that it's a safer environment for everybody.
So it sounds slightly different from what's proposed, at least here in Winnipeg, but we're just at the stage of study, as you heard. So the mayor is proposing, taking, as he put it, sort of the weight off of police or paramedics because they would not be required. That he's seeing this as sort of a separate unit entirely. How involved are paramedics and police in any level of your response? How does that work in Ottawa?
Right. So in the case that I described, that's when somebody has already made a call to 911. So they've already instigated that, and that's where the transfer occurs. But we absolutely, through, again, our partnerships with hospitals and also through the fact that folks reach out directly to us, we are a line that folks can contact instead of contacting 911. And our responders are there to assess the situation and determine, is this something that does require escalation to emergency response, or is this something that can be dealt with right here, right now? And so it really provides a variety of options where we are able to assess what's best needed in that situation. And a lot of times we discover that folks call for all sorts of different reasons that you're inspiring a crisis, but really what they need is not an emergency response service. What they need is to talk things through with a trained specialist. They need to know about other options and resources that they can contact. And so we're able to keep that conversation really rooted in our response with them rather than engaging.
What are the nuts and bolts of the call center then? Like trauma, our mayor wants trauma-informed responders. So what does that look like? How many people are answering the phones and what kind of training do they have in Ottawa?
We use a mix of our staff and volunteers. Volunteers, though, makes it sound perhaps a little less intensive than the process is. We have over 200 folks who volunteer with us, but to be a volunteer with the Distress Center of Ottawa and Region, you have to go through more than 60 hours of specialized training and ongoing mentorship, support, and check-ins with our staff, and in addition to the paid staff that engage on a variety of different services and also ensure quality control and response. So that network of people allows us to ensure that we have, as I said, 24/7, 365 coverage in both English and in French. So it really would not be possible without this network of folks, but it does require a really in-depth training and also a commitment to ongoing learning and upskilling. A big part of our job is to pay attention to what are the issues and the needs that are emerging in our city, and making sure that our responders responders are prepared. So if we see, for example, a rise in calls that are related to concerns about housing and homelessness, we need to make sure our counselors and our responders are trained and ready to respond to that. So it's really a process of ongoing learning and being, as you say, really informed by understanding what a trauma response looks like, and being able to react accordingly.
You get around 60,000 calls a year, as I said at the beginning. How often do you get repeat callers? Do you have a sense of that?
Yes, we do have repeat callers. And I would say it's actually, depending on the service, we see repeat callers for what we sometimes call mental health maintenance. So there is, of course, the absolute emergency and high level of crisis. And our objective is certainly to see as few repeat callers as possible. We want to connect folks with the resources that they need. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that many of the folks that contact us have nowhere else to go and no one else to contact. And that can be because they aren't connected with resources. They don't have access to, let's say, physicians.
So they use the line repeatedly to continue to connect. What do you think the city of Winnipeg should keep in mind if we look at making this transition?
Well, I think that everywhere I've gone, there is community responders who know intimately the details and the needs of the community. And you're no different. There are already, I'm sure, incredible organizations that are networked in and that know the needs of the city. The key is to talk to them. The key is to consult with them about what are the specific concerns of the folks in Winnipeg, but also to know that you're building on this network. There's folks like us here in Ottawa and all across the country who are doing this work just in different ways to suit our communities. So really to lean on this community of mental health distress centers and networks across the country, but tweak it, adjust it, and really listen
to your population. I'm short on time, but I do want to add one more question, because in Winnipeg there have been calls for mental health professionals to respond instead of police for years. And a lot of that has to do with communities who have some distrust or say that they don't need to have police coming in, that we need, the mental health response sort of should be at the forefront. How has your system, how does it affect the police force there? Or do you not have the same kinds of calls and challenges around that?
No, we have a really positive relationship with the Ottawa Police, who have said specifically that they see us as a very helpful and necessary resource. Our job is not to try to be complementary. It's not to take over anything, but instead to be the appropriate response. And as your mayor said, sometimes the appropriate response is not police. That can heighten a situation and escalate it unhelpfully. So you want the appropriate response for the need, and that is trained mental health response, which then frees up police to do the work that they do in those appropriate contexts.
Jessica Fern, thank you. I'm sure we'll talk again as we continue to explore this. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Jessica Fern is the Executive Director of the Distress Centre of Ottawa and Region. How should it work in Winnipeg? For those mental health professionals out there listening, if you want to weigh in on this, 788-3205. It is a way to share his late brother's life with other book lovers. We have a story about Tim Brandt's older brother, Les, who was an avid reader and had a massive collection of books. He loved to talk about what he read with others. So when Les died earlier this year, Tim decided to spread his brother's books all across Winnipeg's free little libraries. Nice story, hey? CBC Manitoba's community reporter Shanley Vidal was there as he was making his final drop-off in the Fort Rouge neighborhood.
I thought I'd bring the last of my donations of his book collection to the Big Red Library that's here at the entranceway to the Hugo Dock. And he just loved coming here just to look at the river in every week at least. I'm Tim Brandt. Les was my older brother. He's 6 years older than I am, and he had been an artist all his life. We grew up with books in the home. We didn't actually have TV in our home when we were kids, so we were all great users of the library. He was social all day, but at night he would go back in his apartment and read till 4 a.m, and he read so many books. It was just astonishing to me. I wanted to donate his books to the little libraries because I felt it was a good way to spread him around, a little bit like scattering his ashes. So I started at the end of September delivering to libraries, and by now, early December, I've come to realize that I did 100 different libraries, and I thought I'd end it now, but winter's setting in. I've had a lot of nice comments and appreciation from friends and Facebook friends about the journey sort of thing, I guess. Yeah, people have said that it was a good way to honor him, and that thanks for taking us along on the ride kind of thing. This was a library that he checked quite regularly and often donated to himself, and I just know it would mean a lot to him that I was bringing his art books there to rest in that library too. I've enjoyed sharing his story through doing this, and so it sort of makes me feel good about him, appreciate him more, rather than just sitting and thinking about him. I feel like I'm sort of giving back something to him. I would hope people would want to share their own loved ones' lives in some creative way, whatever they can think of or see fit, rather than just keep it to themselves. The last book I put in the library was Famous Last Words, a book I just finished reading. If I were to choose a line, smile relieves a heart that grieves, and I found that is very true. No matter how you feel, if you can make yourself smile, it's a relief.
A lovely story, lovely video as well. Thanks to Manitoba community reporter Shanley Vidal and videographer Travis Golby for that. If you're watching the video, it's just really nice watching Tim on his bike with a basket on the front full of the books and dropping them all off all over the city. What a tribute. If you have a book lover in your life, I know that my late mother-in-law read books like that, like just a voracious reader, and what a wonderful tribute to make those donations all to those little libraries. Well, let's continue talking about what's happening with something new in Winnipeg. Community consultations start tonight on the proposed location of a supervised consumption site. It's at 366 Henry, a few blocks west of Main. Housing Additions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith was on yesterday on the show talking about why the province is looking at that location.
People are using in and around that area, and Winnipeg Fire Police and paramedics have, responded to the majority of calls in that area. We know that we had 570 deaths last year. A good portion of those were out and around that area. But we also know that not only people are dying in the streets and overdosing in the streets, we know that people are overdosing in their homes. And we know that people need access to supports. And this is exactly what this site is going to accomplish. It's going to give people a place to consume, but a place to access resources, primary health care, mental health supports, a place to get access to housing, and someone with compassionate, caring support that is going to build relationships and help people realize that they have potential, that they can get onto a path of recovery.
So tonight's consultation, as I mentioned, it run from 6 to 8 o'clock. They are at Siloam Mission, which is a block away from this proposed site. Siloam's interim CEO, Julianne Aitken, is with us now via Zoom to talk about this. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being with us. So what could having a supervised consumption site a block away, do you think, mean for Siloam?
Well, for us, in my understanding, that this is about saving lives and providing access to treatment options and connecting with folks. So that is a good thing, and I think everybody in the community could get behind that. What we are seeing regularly is drug poisonings in and around our building. We don't allow drug use inside the building. However, people do use inside buildings and in washrooms, and our staff are trained to respond. But for us, we rely a lot on EMS and calling emergency services when there's a drug poisoning. So if there was a supervised consumption site that was within walking distance of our building, we could build connections and we could encourage people to go there so that people are connecting with, like Minister Smith, how you just aired, provided a great overview of what is also my understanding of the supervised consumption site and what will be offered in a holistic way. So for us, that would reduce the strain on our direct service staff because folks would be accessing supports there, and then also reduce the calls. We have lots of calls to EMS and emergency services, and this would help reduce it, I believe.
How much is a lot? Like how big of a challenge is it for your staff that are dealing with drug poisonings? In Siloam, or having to call EMS? How often?
Daily. The other week, the number of overdoses or the drug poisonings that took place in and around our building resulted in a drug alert. So it's the toxicity of the drug is real. And if people, I'm not sure sometimes if people understand that with drugs. So it means that if somebody, for example, was buying meth, well, instead of meth, it might be meth, but there's also something like a highly dangerous chemical that's in there, and that changes. So that might mean that the overdose isn't able to be reversed with naloxone. So there's all these different things that if somebody was able to get their drug tested, they would understand what was in their drug, and then they would have somebody on site to respond. When that happens in our parking lot, our staff respond, they provide naloxone, they call emergency services. So I think that in order to support people into treatment, you have to first meet them where they're actually using the substances and provide safe, dignified places for them to connect.
And we'll have to find out whether testing will be part of what happens inside the consumption site. Like, more details will come out. So those will be some of the questions. I just need to clarify something. You said there were so many it resulted in a drug alert. I don't know what that means, actually, a drug alert.
Well, the sector, the harm reduction network, and this is kind of another conversation, but everybody is doing this work and really cares about community and wants to make sure that staff in social service organizations and nonprofits in the sector and in health are aware if there's a noticeable change in a drug supply or a type of drug. So that's shared. So that can also be given to community members. So people who do use drugs do also care about.
So that's why I'm just going to move our conversation forward a bit, if I may. So my understanding then, and tell me if this is correct, then that different kind of drug, like something's going on, you have a day where you have a lot of people that seem to be reacting or as you said, poisoning. Then you sort of put the word out, an alert to say something's going on here.
Correct.
With the supply. I want to ask you about what we heard from some area businesses. So the manager of Pampanga Restaurant and Banquet Hall is Kelly Miranda. Her restaurant's across the street from the proposed site on Henry. She had concerns that folks in the area who come to Siloam for help could be tempted to use because of the proximity to the supervised consumption site. I'm just wondering what you make of what the impact on the population could be, or that concern.
I think understanding that people don't use wouldn't be an invitation to use. People would still have to have, they're not supplying drugs, so people would still have to have the drugs that they were wanting to use, and this is providing an opportunity inside that safe to use. I've heard that, and I think that it's important for people in the community to be able to ask questions and get a better understanding. And I'm looking forward to, I'm joining the meeting this evening, so I'm looking forward to hearing them. We've also worked and continue to try and be good neighbors in this space, because I think that we all really want the same thing. We want safety, we want supports for folks who are unhoused, we want businesses to be doing well in the area, and we want our staff to feel safe coming and going from work. So that's important to us, and I bet that's probably important to most neighbors and businesses here too.
The province does intend to use the site to connect people with services, as you've alluded to, and so did the minister, like housing was brought up. How much of a role could Siloam play in that effort?
Well, we have a 10-year housing strategy. And so one of the areas that we're looking at moving into is some of the gaps and in supports, even from detox. So if somebody comes in and they need a detox bed, and then they move into addictions treatment and then first and second stage housing. So we currently operate a second stage, transitional housing, the Nest, the Arlene Wilson Recovery Center here for 20 individuals. And we'd like to expand that. And we'd like to expand what it could look like if there are gaps and needs in the detox and in second stage housing as well. So that's part of our housing strategy.
The consultation tonight, what questions will you have? What will you be, what are you curious about?
I'm curious to hear more from the neighbors. I'm curious to hear maybe more details on exactly what is going to be happening in the space and when. So I think that in these types of meetings, things get more specific. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. And I'm really looking forward to figuring out what are ways that we can work. This is a complex social issue, health issue. There are ways that we can move forward in a good way. And I want Siloam to be a part of that. And so hopefully this will kind of open my eyes to some things that the neighbors are experiencing, and then we can build relationships going from there.
And in terms of the things that you will hopefully, or not hopefully, the things that you may want to bring forward that you would find important to put on the table tonight, you talked about testing drugs. Is that, for just as an example, you brought that up today. I'm just wondering, is that something that you would say to you would be very important to have at the site as well?
It would be important. And I think another really key part is that it's open, the hours that it's open. So I'm not sure what that looks like right now. We know that the need is great, and we know that there are a lot of unhoused people in this area. So the hours and what would be available for people would be important to know.
Would you like to see it? Do you have hours in mind that you'd like to see?
Definitely weekends. Like, weekends are important, because weekends there's a lot of, because again, if people are unhoused, they have limited spaces where they can go. So although we're open, we have certain times of the day where we do close for cleaning and staff debriefs. So having a space that's open, we're open 7 days a week, but other spaces that are open on weekends and evenings. And I do think that there was consultation at the very beginning with Aboriginal Health and Wellness, who we already partner with, who my understanding is going to be operating it, on what are people in the sector finding the need is for community. So I believe that some of that had already happened when this was first announced several years ago. But
well, we'll see what the meeting brings forward tonight. Julianne, thank you very much for setting up the day for us here with your perspective from Siloam.
Thank you, and thank you for your interest in this topic.
That's Julianne Aitken, interim CEO of Siloam Mission. They will host an in-person consultation session for the proposed supervised consumption site tonight from 6 until 8 o'clock. And of course, we'll have coverage following through. Well, as I mentioned, Manitoba just went through the most severe wildfire season in recent memory. Almost 4% of our land mass in this province burned this spring and summer. That's an area about the size of Lake Winnipeg. 2 people also lost their lives up around Lac du Bonnet, and nearly 30,000 were displaced across Manitoba. Now, in the middle of that wildfire season, you might recall CBC News started asking questions about a wildfire review the province planned to do in 2023. The NDP government was advised to conduct an urgent review that fall, but it was cancelled in favor of an internal review instead. CBC News has now learned those reviews did not involve any written reports or recommendations. Freedom of information requests show the province conducted verbal meetings instead. CBC's Bartley Kivas is here to talk about it, and the story published today by him and his colleague, Kristen Annabel, that you can read. Hi, Bartley.
Good morning.
So first of all, let's go back here. What was this review the province was supposed to do in 2023?
Okay, when governments change, there's something called a transition binder. Basically, stuff the outgoing government flags as important to the new government. So in this binder back in 2023, there was a note marking an urgent issue for the new government. And the NDP was advised to conduct a review of Manitoba's wildfire service, wildfire response, and preparedness. Now, they wanted to ensure the province was as prepared as possible to fight forest fires, grass fires. My colleague Kristen Annabel noticed this, and in June of this year, in the middle of our very severe wildfire season, we asked the province what happened to this review. And the response was, well, the external review didn't happen, but internal reviews were done instead. Here's what Kristen Hayward, the Assistant Deputy Minister in charge of the Wildfire Service, said at a press conference in June when I asked her about this.
We know our situation well, and we're really well positioned to be able to do an assessment and implement any recommendations that would come out of that.
So when Hayward revealed these internal reviews were done, Kristen Annabel filed a bunch of Freedom of Information requests, and it took almost 6 months to respond, plus a complaint to the Ombudsman of Manitoba about the delay.
So what did you learn?
Well, those internal reviews, they consisted mostly of verbal discussion, according to Kristen Hayward. There were no written reports with recommendations about how to improve the wildfire service. On top of that, the day we asked about these reviews in June, Hayward warned other officials the province didn't have enough people to really do these reviews. She wrote in that June email, and I quote, "Due to some limitations in staff capacity, we have not been producing formal written reports that detail the outcome of these reviews. They are more like meeting notes and verbal discussion," unquote. Now, we asked Hayward about this in an interview, and she said the province didn't really need a more formal review.
So we focus on rapid feedback so that we're able to adapt on the go. So our quote-unquote review is conducted through discussions and meetings, both during the response and after the response. We don't like to focus on writing up lengthy written reports just because our response really needs to be agile.
But didn't the province say it was urgent to do a more formal review in 2023?
Well, that's what it was, yes, and that was flagged in that transition binder. But we also found out from the documents that there was they really were prepared for this in the form of that there was $100,000 set aside for an external review, and the province looked for a consultant to do that review and selected one. But after the recommendation went to Jamie Moses, the first NDP cabinet minister in charge of the wildfire service, nothing happened.
Why? Why not?
Well, we asked for an interview with Moses and with Ian Bushy, the minister in charge of wildfires now, but the province said no to both of those requests. Spokespeople for Wabkinu's cabinet said it was a department, that is wildfire staff, who insisted they didn't need a review. So I spoke to Greg Nesbitt about it. Now, he's the PC MLA for Riding Mountain. He was a cabinet minister in charge of the wildfire service before the change of government in 2023. Nesbitt authorized this external consultant, and he says he's disappointed the review didn't take place, and he doesn't believe it could have been handled internally. He traveled to northern Manitoba communities several years back to see how prepared they were firsthand.
It was too big a job to determine all the deficiencies that existed, and we needed people to go out there and talk to people in the field. I remember talking to people in the field and telling me about, generators that needed parts and things like that, and the fact that we weren't prepared if a fire hit a First Nation, because normally you had initial attack crews from the First Nation that would attack the fire before we could fly in people. And that was very, very concerning because Bartley, how remote those First Nations are, and getting crews in there quickly was tough.
So how did all of this impact the 2025 wildfire season, which of course was considered one of the worst wildfire seasons on record?
Okay, so I want to be very clear here. There's no way to know whether Manitoba would have done a better job this year if an outside pair of eyes took a gander at how we prepare for wildfire seasons. Even Nesbitt, the PC MLA, won't go that far, but he does believe canceling the external review was a mistake.
I'm just shocked that they wouldn't have carried through on a review. I mean, and for something like this summer's fire season to happen, which nobody could have predicted it would have been this bad, right? But to be so unprepared, and I think if you talk to people on the fire lines, I think they would tell you about the lack of preparedness and the lack of equipment that they had accessible.
So what happens now?
Well, in the throne speech.
Oh, we just have to get your mic back on. Sorry. What happens now, Bartley?
Well, in the throne speech in November, the NDP government did commit to an external wildfire review, and it'll include input from firefighters in Alberta who tried to save Jasper in 2024. The NDP government says this will be the broadest review yet.
All right, Bartley, thank you.
You're more than welcome.
That's CBC's Bartley Kivas in studio with his report. You can read more on the story this morning on our website right now. It's cbc.ca/Manitoba. A developing story, more geese were found dead in Manitoba. CBC News videographer Justin Fraser took images of nearly 50 geese in Lockport, Manitoba yesterday. Now, this comes on the heels of the news that 165 dead geese were found on the ice of a Niverville retention pond last week. Now, those carcasses in Niverville were removed last Friday after it was confirmed that they were killed by an avian flu outbreak. We have not yet confirmed the cause of the dead geese in Lockport. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing some of those images. Frank Baldwin is a Canadian Wildlife Service biologist. He's familiar with both cases, and he joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how much do we know about what happened in Lockport?
Well, we haven't collected any of those carcasses yet for testing, but just based on the number of carcasses from other parts of Manitoba that have been tested at the provincial lab, most of those are suspected to be a form of this highly pathogenic avian influenza virus, so this H5 virus. So those get tested at the provincial lab, and then they go for confirmation at the national lab. And just based on the number and the distribution, we suspect that the same disease is killing these birds in Lockport.
When you say based on the number, is if there were 3 birds, you wouldn't worry? Like, can you elaborate a bit?
Well, it's a bit of an interesting situation this year because we haven't seen this level of mortality in geese. So the virus is something that the birds have evolved with. This latest virus is one that came to North America in 2021. And it's an interesting one because typically these viruses don't harm migratory birds. They carry them, they transmit them, they can really become harmful to domestic poultry, but typically they don't kill wild birds. And since this incursion of this latest virus, that's been changing. And we suspect that the high rate of mortality that we're seeing now is related to us seeing a peak in the virus when we typically have already lost most of our birds to migration, and also just the fact that the birds are under tremendous thermal stress this time of year when we have really cold conditions.
The virus is changing here or changing everywhere? What do we understand about how it might be adapting?
Yeah, it's changing everywhere. So it came over from Eurasia in 2021, and it moved across the continent really quickly, much quicker than other viruses have. And it recombines with our North American lineage viruses, so it's constantly adapting. So it's very capable of adaptation, and that's why we've seen it move across a huge number of different bird species and also into a huge variety of mammals also.
How concerning is this for you?
It's definitely concerning because it's not something we've seen before. So people have been working a long time on avian influenza, and we haven't seen this level of mortality before, or just like I said, the number of different species that have been impacted. To date, we haven't detected an effect on goose survival. So Canada goose survival rates in adults and juveniles have been relatively unchanged, but our data from that, which comes from banding them annually, it lags a bit behind time. So, our latest estimates are 2023 estimates. So it's possible that it's having more of an impact in the last year or two than it has since it came in 2021.
Remind us about the spread. I mean, obviously it's changing and morphing, but remind us about what we know about avian flu as it's presented in the past. And the question actually, to make it more specific, is coming because our videographer who took these images in Lockport yesterday, one of these geese looks like appears that he was eaten by, a scavenger. Can a predator be infected if the carcass does, if it is confirmed to have avian flu?
Yes, there's a huge variety of scavengers which has already been shown to be infected this fall. So from the provincial vet lab, we have detections of the H5 form of this virus in coyotes, in otters, and foxes, and ravens, and crows, and snowy owls, and bald eagles. So definitely scavengers can become infected.
Help us understand the geese populations. So you see, it's the startling images, right? Seeing all these geese on the retention pond in Niverville, and now these images in Lockport last night, all these geese all over the ice. Once it's in a population are geese particularly being affected right now all over the place, or are these populations connected somehow?
Yeah, so it's interesting, and the virus has a very cyclic nature annually. So it really peaks in late November, December, January. And most of these geese, when they're here in the summer, so the birds that we're seeing now, they're a combination of geese from different areas. So we know from bands that we've recovered, and also just based on the size of the geese, there's birds that nest in Nunavut, and also from northern Manitoba, and then also from ones that nest in southern Manitoba here. And it's very cyclic in that in the spring and summer, those birds don't have any active infections of the virus, although they do have evidence of past exposure. So a very high proportion of the population's been exposed and survived. And then they come south and they mix with ducks, which are really what is thought to be the main reservoir of the virus. They become exposed to ducks, and when the weather gets cold and the birds concentrate in the last remaining open water, the virus moves through the population, or what's left of the population here, very quickly. And that's what we think is causing this peak in mortality now.
Okay, this may be an ignorant question, but why are ducks not all over the place then because of this? Or are they affected differently?
Well, we don't know for sure, but we know that ducks have a lot of background immunity from exposure to low pathogenicity avian flu viruses. So they've evolved with avian flu. They tend to be infected at a high rate, and perhaps that offers them some, increased level of
Protection.
immunity to the virus.
We should remind for listeners that are just sort of leaning into this now, how dangerous is this virus to humans?
So Public Health Agency of Canada, who's the authority on human health, they still consider it low risk to humans, but people should definitely take precautions. So they shouldn't be handling wild birds which have died for suspicious reasons or which appear sick. And they should also not allow their pets to interact with those sick or dead birds either.
So if you find a dead carcass on or near your property, what should your step be for the cleanup process?
Well, we have a sort of a coordinated approach with the province to become aware of events where there's large mortality events or any mortality events, and that's to call the Turn-In Poachers tip line, which is 1-800-782-0076. And that just allows people to report the case. There's not a guarantee that it'll be necessarily cleaned up because that depends on a lot of considerations like safe ice conditions, open water, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at least it makes us aware of the presence of dead birds and perhaps gathering some for testing.
You ever seen anything like this before, Frank?
No, I haven't. No, the images are pretty striking. I was down in Niverville and just seeing the number of dead birds on that pond or the several ponds in town was pretty striking. And in communication with other colleagues across Canada, just the number of dead birds in one area is not something that they've experienced either.
So just as a last question, then what are they telling you from other provinces? Then are they having the same thing right now?
Yeah, it's starting to peak or to kick up in Ontario right now. So they're definitely having more cases, more mortality events, and also just sick birds that people are calling. But it's not at the scale of mortality that we have seen yet, possibly because they don't have the ice conditions that we do and the cold weather, and maybe that's to come. But talking to some colleagues in Saskatchewan that do still have open water and birds, they're not seeing mortality there yet.
Okay, well, maybe more questions and answers around some of this, but we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Frank Baldwin, Canadian Wildlife Service biologist. More dead geese found in Manitoba. Images by CBC News videographer Justin Fraser yesterday showed 50 geese in Lockport out on the ice dead. Last week, the 165 geese, 165 of them found dead on the Niverville retention pond, were confirmed for avian flu. The ones in Lockport we have not yet confirmed. If you want to read more, cbc.ca/Manitoba.